Hi, welcome to the Gospel According to Albert. And I'm going to share a few bits of my life with you today, and hopefully it will inspire you and kind of have a sense of my journey with God so far and how God has been a father to me and a friend. Yeah. Fast forward 2014, and at that point, I've been working in a school in Portsmouth for just over 5 years. And 2014 is also a special year for me because I got married to my wife, Fiona, on 7th of April that year. But soon after our wedding, just before the summer holidays, work has already been difficult. It's been building up to that point, and literally, I just knew in me that things were not going to get easier. It wasn't going to be easy after that point, and if anything, it was going to get even worse because of the conditions of work. And every time I've raised the situation, nothing has changed, and it just felt like somebody would say you've been set up to fail completely. But at the same time, I didn't feel this sense of, pack your bags and move on, because being a school teacher and teaching math, if you want to move, you can move easily, but knowing that I've already been through a capability procedure, literally 2 years before that, knowing that and knowing how God has carried me through it, I decided to still put my trust in him and trust him. It hasn't been easy for 5 years, but throughout the whole situation, he's been faithful to me. He's carried me through every single situation. So I felt, I'm going to lean on him. I'm going to trust him. But at the same time, part of the reason for not wanting to move was I've always felt, since I moved to that school, I felt that God moved me there for a reason. And right from day one, I started to pray about the reason why he moved me there. But never really felt anything, there was nothing I could put my finger on to say, hey, this is why he moved me to that school. So I decided not to move and stay. But building up to October, I just kept feeling that this is all coming to a head, and there was something, a capability procedure in the works. So I started to pray about this situation even harder, hoping God would change things around and do something incredible in my favor. Just give me another school. And at the same time, I started looking around for schools, but there was nothing attractive to me, nothing pulling me. And so I remember one morning I was praying, and after half term in October, we've been married in April. Now it's after October, half term, November, praying one morning, and I just was reading through Lamentations, and God started speaking and through his word, and he spoke in a way I've never felt before. I was sat there praying, reading the word literally, and I just felt this sense of peace over me. It just came over me, and all of a sudden I had this thought in my head that said, I had this phrase in my head that says, it's time to go, and I just knew that moment that this is what I have to do. It's time for me to go. So it's time for me to leave. And if you work in education, you know that your window of moving is literally, you need to put your letter in. You need to put your letter of resignation in before October half term, so the school has an opportunity to kind of get themselves ready and bring somebody in to start in January, if you're going at the end of the term. But it was after October, so one of the difficulties for me at that point was, one, telling Fiona, because we've just been married. We haven't even been married for a year. and all of a sudden you're going to be without employment. You got bills to pay, and that was one of my worries, to be honest. Leaving the school was never a bother to me. It wasn't a problem for me because, hearing God speak those words to me, I just knew that, I need to go now, So I went to work that morning, not saying anything to Fiona. I went to work that morning, and I was in the staff room, the maths department office, and my head of department came and sat next to me, and she started talking to me, and she started talking to me about my conditions and my quality of teaching and everything. And she said she's just had a meeting with the head or the deputy head, and they're going to put me, and the decision has been made that I was going to go into capability. And at that moment, I just turned to her and I said to her, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go into capability. I'm not going to do that. And she said to me, why? I said, well, I'm just going to resign. And it was just that simple. And she was surprised that I was prepared to resign than to go through capability. I said, yeah, I'm going to resign. And still, I haven't spoken to Fiona yet. So for the rest of the week, this thing just bugged me. It just played on my mind, trying to find a way to let her know that this is my decision and this is what I'm going to do next, because I had nothing lined up at that point. So the crunch time came on Saturday morning or somewhere in the afternoon, but it was Saturday, and she could tell that for the rest of the week my mood is just I've been distant from her. I've been distant. So we sat down to talk, and she asked me, she started saying to me, asking why I've been this way towards her and stuff. So I just burst into tears, and because it was that emotional for me. And I spoke to her and said to her, look, this is what I've decided to do, and I'm just going to resign. I'm going to put a letter of resignation in on Monday, and I'm going to get in touch with the union and see what the union can do to kind of get me out. So that's what I did. And to my surprise, she was just happy with that. I said to her, look, I'll do anything. I don't care what I do for a living. I'm not fussed about not teaching anymore, because at that point, to be honest, I was prepared to just do something else other than teach. So I went to work the following Monday, put the letter in, phoned the union, spoke to them, sent a couple of emails to the union, and by December, everything is worked out, left. But before that, God being God, He opened new doors. I started looking for work around Portsmouth. Nothing was coming up. And we started talking about moving away from Portsmouth because, to be honest, we've just been married. We're thinking of having families. So we thought, you know what? Your parents live in Dorset. Why don't we move closer to them? Childcare was the main thing on the agenda. That was the deal clincher for us. So we thought, okay, let's move closer to them. So, and so I started looking for work in Poole, something temporary to just cover me till I can find something else to do. And she started looking for work as well, and we both got an interview in Poole. I got interviewing in Oakdale Primary School for a classroom teacher, and she got an interview with Poole, education psychologist department. So yeah, we both arrived in Poole on the same day, stayed with Ian and Sheila the night before, and then went to an interview the following day. And I remember in my interview, I just did my interview, everything, and they phoned me up the same day, later on in the afternoon, and they said to me, sorry, but we can't offer you the position you interviewed for because there was a candidate that was much stronger than you, but we liked you so much that we want to create a new position for you, and that is, if you want to do that, then we'll work with you, but we just feel this is you, this is what we want to do with you, so it's up to you to decide. And I turned around to them and said, yeah, well, I'll do that. But I think one of the challenges was driving from Portsmouth. I had to, it means commuting from Portsmouth to Poole every day, because it meant starting to work in January. Fiona wasn't going to start in January. She was still going to keep working in Portsmouth till April. So it meant traveling back and forth every day from Portsmouth to Poole. But the school God was incredibly generous. He arranged everything to the point that the school turned around and said, look, you don't have to start early. You can start at 10 and finish late, so you can still get back, miss the rush hour, and then going back you miss the rush hour as well. So I thought, yeah, it's a deal clincher. This is a win-win. Everything has been set up for me, around me, to support me, to make sure I get there and do what I need to do. And for me, that for me always speaks about trusting God, learning to lean on Him and letting Him decide my steps. Because the more looking back on the situation, I realized that I stayed in that place because I made a decision to trust Him. I stayed in that place because I made a choice to hear His voice, to guide me through it and guide me to the next thing. So, and at the same time, now I look back and realize that, man, as much as the situation, the place was difficult, was hard ground, God did incredible stuff in me. He worked on my character in ways I can't even explain. He molded me into a different person. Because leaving that place, looking at me now, and then I see a huge difference in me as a person. So, yeah, that's my first story. Second story is moving to Poole. And when we decided to move, I just felt the need to pray about where we go to church, because at that point I've just been feeling this stirring in my heart. I've been drawing nearer and nearer to God, and I've started to hear, his whispers. So I can hear His voice, but not prolific like other people. I can't, to be honest, I wasn't hearing His voice constantly all the time or every situation, but I could hear His voice every now and then. I could hear His whispers. So I knew I knew I could hear His voice. So, and I was thirsty, I was basically just yearning for more of Him. So I said to Fiona, look, I just pray, we need to pray about where we go to church. And at the time, her parents had been going to Lighthouse Church, so Fiona is just excited for us to go to Lighthouse Church. So we moved in with Ian and Sheila. Our flat still hasn't sold, and so we're still waiting on the process to come, the place to sell. And we lived with Ian and Sheila for, I think, almost about 8 months. And throughout that whole process, again, I had to learn to trust God. And I remember so I kept saying to them, look, I need to try a few churches, because I didn't want to go to Lighthouse because her parents go there. I just want to go because I want to be at a place where God wants us to be, because that is the place where we're just going to bear the most fruit for Him. Choosing to work with Him always leads to a better outcome for you than when you work in your own strength. So for me, that's the way at that point I decided that is the route for me, and nothing else matters. So we were living with Ian and Sheila, and every time I say, oh, maybe we should go every 5th Sunday or so, I say, oh, maybe we should just go to another church and have a taste of what the other churches are like. Because I wasn't feeling a pull towards the Lighthouse. I was going there, but I just didn't feel like this is where God says go, So that was for me. And then I think one day, I think we were looking for a house, and we came to look at this very house we're in. And Fiona just fell in love with the house, because we've looked around for quite a bit and we haven't found anything really interesting. We both kind of like this house, and it's roughly about 10-15 minutes walk from the Lighthouse Church. So we put an offer in, and it was accepted. So it just felt like at that point, it just felt like, yeah, it's gonna be this one. But the process was going on. We started to chain the purchase process here at the same time, trying to complete the a sale in Portsmouth so we can transfer assets into this purchase. And one morning I was praying, and I just felt, you know, this sense of God saying, stay. And but God didn't say anything more than that, just stay. So I thought, okay, fine. If the lighthouse, if you're saying stay, then we'll stay till I figure out, we know what else. And then a few weeks after that, I came back from work one day and I was upstairs changing, and I could hear noises downstairs. So changed, came downstairs, and it turned out that the people buying our property and buying a flat in Portsmouth have just pulled out. A few days, I think within days of exchange, they just decided, no, they're not going to buy. So, people were worried and stuff, and but I wasn't. And I wasn't worried at all, because I just felt this in me, and I spoke out at that moment, and I said, look, don't worry. Tomorrow, a new buyer will come in. And it was as simple as that. It was Friday, and everybody thought, oh, this is Albert being optimistic. How can a new buyer come in? How can you say that? And God being God, he just surprised us, because the following day, I think about lunchtime, we got a phone call from the estate agent in Portsmouth to say that, look, somebody's been in to have a look at the flat, and they loved it, and they just want to buy it, and they're a cash buyer, and they just want to be in that place by Christmas. So, not only did we get a new buyer, we got somebody who definitely was going to drive the process, and it wasn't going to be a long process, because most of the work has already been done, and they just want to just drive it through because they want to finish it as quickly as possible. So we phoned the buyer, the estate agent for this house, and we said, look, this is the situation, and we've got a new buyer, and it's gonna. So they said, okay, we'll talk to the seller and see what they do. And the seller turned around and said, yeah, we'll hold on for you to finish, and we can finish this deal. And everything worked out perfectly, because at that time, the same time, Fiona was also pregnant with James, So it was an incredible time for us. Not only did we get a new house, we got to start life together as a family, as a new family in a new place. And it was incredible, because God delivered, and he answered our prayer in ways I can't, in ways I can't understand, because moving to this house, it just felt like, what? He said, stay. And now he's put you within walking distance to the church. So for me, at the time, it was a bit strange. It just felt like a confirmation that, yeah, this is the place he wants you to be at. And so I thought, okay, fine. But throughout the whole process, something in me was yearning for more and more of God. And I've been reading a book called The Discipline of a Godly Man. And I've got to a chapter where he's talking about prayer. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to alter my life and make some space in my life to pray a bit more than I've been doing. So, and prayer is not something I would say come naturally to me. So at the time, there was a suggestion, an idea in the book to make a list about things you want to pray about Monday, Tuesday, each day of the week, literally. So I went with that, and I started doing it. And it wasn't about waking up early in the morning to do anything. For me, it was about finding a space. So it happened to be before going to bed. So I remember Fiona would say, I'm going off to bed. So she would go off, and then I'll stand in the kitchen every night and pray. And at the same time, around that same time, we've been trying to find a name for our baby, but we just couldn't settle. We couldn't agree on any name. And I remember one morning, again, God answering prayer. one morning I was lying in bed. We've kind of been talking about something I can't remember exactly in the morning, and we finished talking. I was sat in bed, and all of a sudden I fell into this deep sleep. And then the moment I fell into this deep sleep, I had it's like a dream. So I had a dream, and I was back at D22, and there was an American lady. She had I wouldn't say young, but a bit old, and she was kind of talking, and I was walking up and down in the church with the Bible in my hand, and all of a sudden the woman turned around to me and said, "Hugh, I need to talk to you about your son." And he said, "Yeah, your son James." So the lady just mentioned my son, and Fiona wasn't with me in the dream. I had no son in the dream as well. It was just me. So, but when she spoke to me, another lady turned around and said, "Look, oh yes, about your son. There's something God gave me a word for your son, and I've got it in the book. So I just need to go pick up the book and come and tell you." And then Fiona woke me up. So I woke up from this dream, and I said to Fiona, not very happy because for me I missed part of the dream. I just wanted to hear what the lady was going to say to me about our son, because at that time I knew it was a son. We haven't, even before we had a scan to check, because Fiona wanted to know the sex of the baby. Before that point, I knew it was his son, because God has already started showing me pictures of our son. So I turned around to Fiona and said, "Look, how do you feel about the name James?" And she turned around to me. She paused for a bit and turned around and said, "Yeah, James. I like the name James. Yeah." I said, "Okay, it's settled. He's going to be called James." And again, that's God coming through for me. And, because when it got to a point we couldn't decide on the names, I just decided to pray about it. And again, God answered our prayer. But still, there was something in me that still kept longing for more and more and more of God. But I think the crunch time, the point of no return came when, and I'm going to fast forward. I think we used to have this Tuesday worship mornings at D22, and I went to D22 one of these Tuesday mornings, and at that point, I've been feeling this sense of, God, if it means laying down my everything down for you, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to surrender everything. And I remember that morning, I had James in my hands, James with me, and he was down playing on the floor with, I think it was Sheila or Ian. And I was just standing there in worship with my hands open. And I think all I kept saying is, my life is available to you. I surrender my life to you. I'm available to you. I'm available to you, and you do what you want to do in me. And as I kept praying over and over these prayers, all of a sudden I just kept feeling the weight of something on me, to the point that I just couldn't stand, and all of a sudden I saw Heather come close to me, and I think it was Heather or Alistair. And the moment she just, I don't know what she did, but she went behind me, and all of a sudden I just fell to the ground, and that changed my life. That shifted everything in my life completely, because it changed it changed my relationship with God. And it became, since that point, everything in my life start longing. It felt like, I encountered him. But after that encounter, he created a bigger longing for him in me, that I began to pursue him with a desire to, not to want anything, but a desire to be in closer fellowship with him, a desire to just be with him, because it felt like from that day, everything in me just started crying out for him and him alone. And looking back on my life, that moment I can say changed my relationship with Him. It changed how I see God and how I hear Him. Because from that up to now, I can say that the encounter I had with God at D22, after that, it wasn't like I came home and I was just buzzing. I could hear God and hear His voice and jumping around. It wasn't anything like that. I think it was a few months after that, and God just rocked up in this house. One morning, I was in the middle of putting a bed together because we've just bought a new bed, and I was fixing the bed, and all of a sudden, I had these phrases in my head, like a series of instructions, like to give money to somebody. So I called you, and God started talking about somebody. Like telling me stories about this person. So I called Fiona to the room, and I said, look, could we give these people some money? And surprisingly, she said, yeah. But why? I said, well, I just felt God say, give them this money. So I phoned up this person and said, look, God just said to give you this money. So can you forward me your details and we'll wire the money to you? And they did. So we wired the money to them and shared whatever God was saying about them to them as well. And since that point, God started speaking. And it wasn't just speaking through His word, but I began to hear His voice. I began to discern His voice. I began to, get these impressions in my heart, get these thoughts where it's not mine, but it's His, And I think I became aware at the moment that God is always speaking. And that's why for me God became the God who speaks, who is always speaking. And He speaks through children, He speaks through, and the way God speaks is incredible because often he speaks in ways that blows me away because he speaks through some of my students. He speaks through my son. He speaks through bedtime stories. He speaks through conversations with my with my 4-year-old son. And so God has become something I've come to love, and I've come to, not that I didn't have any love for Him before my encounter with Him at D22, but my affections for God, my love for God is completely different. It used to be going to God because I wanted something. Now it's the other way around. I go to God not because I want anything. And to be honest, I don't pray about the things I long for anymore. I hardly pray about the things I need, the things I desire. If anything, I just hand my desires to Him, because I know it's already got me covered. And looking back at my life and looking at His track record in my life, tells me that yes, God is a God we can trust. Is God that we can lean on. Is God we can rely on, and we can count on Him to deliver every single moment because He is faithful. So that's a bit about my story and how I've learned to trust God and hear His voice and walk with Him.